So it's an absolute pleasure to invite Gaia Puleston, who is the convener of the next panel session. Gaia is the new General Manager of our Policy and International branch at AAD, and Gaia's been there for potentially 9 months now. Okay. And it was a real pleasure to welcome Gaia to AAD because we shared this same sense that there's this urgent need to actually bring science and policy together, and not only to bring it together, but to position policy upstream of science so that it's really shaping the design of our science rather than letting us undertake our research and try and retrofit that to policy needs. So it's been a pleasure working alongside Gaia over the last 12 months, and I'll let you introduce your panel members.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nicole. It really has been a pleasure being at AAD for the last 12 months, and this exploration of and pursuit of a science policy nexus and what it means has been one of the highlights. It's been great to be here today. I was really excited to come up to Canberra and to participate in this symposium. I've learnt a lot. It's been fascinating to hear the wide range of science that we do at the AAD, but as the General Manager of Policy and International, I've been really pleased to hear all the international multilateral acronyms, the ACAP and the CAMLR and the CEP and the IPCC and the IWC being mentioned in terms of that interface between policy and science and how science can inform policy. We've got a great panel here of representatives from the AAD and from the department who have a wealth of expertise. We've heard from Aleks Terauds earlier today. I won't repeat his bio, but just to remind you, Senior Principal Research Scientist at the AAD. Jaimie Cleeland, also we heard just a couple of presentations ago, fisheries scientist within the Southern Ocean Ecosystems Program. We also have close here to me Ewan McIvor, who's our Senior Environmental Policy Advisor in the Policy and International branch. He is Australia's representative to the Committee for Environmental Protection, which is the peak intergovernmental body for considering protection of the Antarctic environment, and was chair of the CEP from 2015 to 2018. Wealth of experience there. Also a wealth of experience with Dirk Welsford, sitting next to Ewan here. Dirk is currently the science convener for the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water, where he leads a team developing strategies to enhance the overall role that science plays in decision making across the department. We heard from Secretary David Fredericks this morning about the passion that he has and that this department has for bringing science and policy together. Dirk is also chair of the Scientific Committee for the Conservation for Antarctic Marine Living Resources and has been a scientist at the AAD for over 20 years, and apparently, I learnt this afternoon, somehow responsible / connected to the headless chicken monster. So that's fantastic. We're going to try and keep it short and punchy. I've got 3 questions for the panel, and a couple of you will probably answer each of them, I imagine. I know we're at the end of a long day, but I think bringing together the policy and science at the end of the day is both symbolic and important. So thanks, Nicole, for that opportunity. So number 1, core base question. Panel. How can scientists best influence policy, and what can policymakers do to support that? Over to you. Who would like to speak? Jaimie. Fantastic.
I'm like one of those policymakers, scientists' worst nightmare. You know, I'm the field biologist that likes to argue with the field training officer to, band one more albatross. And I think about the scientists in our team spending 3 months on a fishing boat listening to Korean pop music, dissecting toothfish gonads. We are the kind of on that front line seeing change. And what I've seen really effective in our team, in the AAD fisheries team, is our close proximity and relationship with the AAD policy team. That really means when I go and sit in the scientific meetings as an Australian delegate to CAMLR, that I'm ready and that I'm best placed to make that change happen. But I think the critical thing for us is having a linchpin, a science negotiator, that person that sits between us on the ground scientists and the policymakers. So we have a very effective person in our team that does that, that bridges that, that knowledge of science and policy and guides us scientists to deliver the best science. So my recommendation, Gaia, would be to know your linchpin and look after them.
Thank you. Well, talking about linchpins, I've just caught Ewan's eye. So Ewan, over to you.
That doesn't mean I'm going to be lynched, does it? No.
Promise you not.
Well, I don't want to play to this audience, but I would say that one of the best parts of my role representing Australia in the CEP is getting to work really closely on a daily basis with amazing scientists, many of whom have spoken here today. So I sort of get to live in the science policy interface. And I think, like any relationship, an effective relationship between science and policy really relies on good communication. And so what that doesn't look like from the policy side is the policymaker saying to the scientists, oh, you can go to the really awesome policy tab on the intranet and look up our policies and objectives and science needs. And what it doesn't look on the science side is, oh, you can just go and read my article in the International Journal of Really Amazing Science, and that's where all my knowledge is. So I think we need to have a closer and more interactive relationship than that. And I think in Australia we're really lucky to have a relatively large community of Antarctic scientists, and also now an increasingly large body of Antarctic policymakers within the Antarctic Division and also in DFAT. But I don't think it's so large that we can't all know each other and work really closely together. So I'm hoping we do that, and that today is going to help us along that track. From my side, the policy side, the sorts of science we're looking for is science that's relevant to policy priorities, and you don't have to go to the intranet, you can talk to us about what those are. It's high quality, and I can't tell the science community what high quality science looks like, but you know, it's rigorous, it's impartial, it identifies where gaps are and where there's differences of opinion. And it's also accessible, so it's digestible to a general audience. It's going to make sense and have impact with a informed and interested generalist audience. So, a few comments from me. Thanks.
And I'm quite short, in case you hadn't noticed, but I think Aleks is trying to catch my eye across the panel. So, Aleks, over to you.
Thank you. And just to round out the comments from Jaimie and Ewan, I think I'd just reiterate the importance of understanding the issues of the day. What are the priorities? What are the priorities in these forums that are actually best targeted for maximum impact? And I think with the sorts of communication that Ewan's been talking about, the iterative relationship that both Jaimie and Ewan have talked about, if we have an understanding, a mutual understanding between scientists and policymakers of what those issues are, even better if we can get them in advance and actually target our science accordingly, then I think that's the way to have the most impact. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a potentially pointy question, actually. So in the last year, I've had the good fortune of participating in the Australian delegation to the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting, of becoming Australia's Commissioner for the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, and chairing the meeting of parties for the agreement for the conservation of albatrosses and petrels. And I think we have a wealth of international representation on this panel. What I have seen is that best available science, this concept that was designed to help support evidence-based policy making, occasionally is not always used in a way that actually supports evidence-based policy making. So, if I may, panel, what do you think that we policymakers and scientists can do to work together to make sure that science is used to advance rather than to slow down policy making? And I can see Dirk eagerly leaning in, so over to you, Dirk.
So you'll recall that the Secretary spoke this morning about best available science and the fact that it's actually contested, has been for quite a long time. And it goes right back to, tactics that were developed defending the tobacco industry and, arguing against the fact of climate change and so on and so on. And we can see that there's members of some of these treaty forums that are using exactly the same tactics. Go away, there's still too much uncertainty, go away and do more science. And unfortunately that does pull on scientists, some of the worst nature in scientists. They go, oh, okay, great, that's an imprimatur for me to go and do more science. Awesome, thanks, I agree. There is still too much uncertainty, let's go and do more science. But I think the power of the concept of best available science is, it's the best. So, you have a process, and the treaty meetings have a process to decide what the best available science is. You sit down and you talk about it. It's got to be available. So it's not about saying, oh, in 2 years' time we'll have better science. So let's wait until we have that data or that science so we can make the decision then. Saying it's available. It's got to be here now. It's got to be tabled at the meeting. And it's science, so it's done in a way that has integrity. It can be repeatable. It's actually, a perspective on the natural world. It's not something supernatural. And so, I think best available science is actually it's still a very, very strong concept, but we need to be aware that it is contested, it is under attack, and that comes from, some really, really well-honed tactics that have been used to undermine science in the past. So I think the best thing that we can do is be aware that it's under attack, not buy into the whole idea that, there's too much uncertainty. In most cases, there is enough information available to make a decision, and that's inherent in the precautionary approach, right? You've got to make a decision regardless of whether you've got, enough information to have certainty, and that's enshrined in the Antarctic Treaty System. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dirk. I'm going to move on to the next question now, because I think that was a really comprehensive response, Dirk. Thank you. Unless Ewan, did you want to, am I cutting you off, Ewan? I'm sorry, over to you. No. Okay. I have a question for you, and I think Ewan, you'll be interested in this one. So it's the end of the day. I think we've already had Nicole saying that Justine was so inspiring that is the way we should have finished the day. I challenge you, panel, to help with this concept of inspiration. Can you think of any brilliant inspirational examples of where you've seen science inform policy, or indeed policy inform science, because this is a circular relationship that we have on, that's left you inspired and motivated that you can share with us today? Jaimie, fantastic.
Well, it's not just science and policy, but it's industry as well. I suppose I've been in this fisheries scientist role for 2 years, and in that 2 years we have identified the issue of skate bycatch. We've taken it to the Australian Fisheries Management Authority. We've worked with our collaborators in France and changed the way that bycatch is managed on vessels. But really the exciting stuff is the industry-led change and the integration of new technologies, and one in particular, this bouncy trawl net that is used on the Kerguelen Plateau to catch ice fish, and it bounces along the bottom as opposed to hitting the bottom and dragging along, and that just means that skates can swim under and away, and that's a really current example. It's happening right now. It's not fully complete, we're still working on this, but its success is purely because the science team and the policy team came together and worked with industry to make it happen in a short time. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jaimie. That really is quite motivating. Dirk, I see your hand.
Yeah, so something that I haven't been involved in at all, but I'm really inspired by is the way that science and policy and technology and industry came together to deal with ozone depleting chemicals. So, and it has a nice Antarctic link. There were scientists at the AAD that were involved in detecting the problem and working out what the process was behind that. There were CFCs destroying ozone. And now you can actually see that all of that effort, all of those multilateral negotiations to get the global community to agree to stop making CFCs has had a dividend. The ozone hole is closing. And, you know, I find that really inspirational, and that gives me hope that we can do something about climate change as well. You know, it's a big, scary problem. It's global, and it will need us all to work together to come up with an effective solution, but we've done it before, so hopefully we can do it again. Thanks.
Thank you, Dirk. That ozone is an excellent, I think, example of where science combined with multilateral negotiations can really achieve results. Aleks, I saw you pulling the mic closer to you, so it's your turn.
Well spotted, Gaia. I think I wanted to raise probably not such quite as a contemporary example as Jaimie did, but the legacy of this example is still felt today. And I wanted to talk about the Aliens in Antarctica initiative. This is aliens in the sense of things that aren't supposed to be in Antarctica. And Dana, who spoke earlier today, and Stephen Chown, who's also in the audience, amongst a whole range of international collaborators, led this work to give us an understanding of, for the first time really, what people were taking to Antarctica and to the sub-Antarctic as well. This was then published in a high-profile journal, and subsequently just identifying this as an issue and actually quantifying the scale of it led to across-the-board changes in biosecurity, almost across every national program of Antarctica. And this body of research is still continuing today through academics and postgraduate students and PhDs, and the more we understand, because that path from science to policy has already been established, we actually are improving and continually improving our biosecurity protocols as more information comes to light. So I think that's one of the best examples I know of.
Fantastic, and really relevant to what we've been talking about this afternoon. Ewan, having cut you off before, I now give you the final word from the panel. Over to you.
Oh no, you didn't cut me off, and now that I know the convention isn't to raise the flag, it's to pull the microphone closer, I'll do that. So Australia is committed to protecting the Antarctic environment, but as has been mentioned in a few presentations, we can't protect what we don't know, or at least we can't do that effectively. So the piece of science I wanted to mention was some work that was actually led by colleagues in this room, down the end of the panel here, Aleks, Terauds, Stephen Chown, and some of their collaborators in Australia and internationally, to identify what were called Antarctic conservation biogeographic regions. So what they did was draw on the best available science and build that best available science to know how biodiversity changes across large-scale regions of Antarctica. So that was, really fundamental work to understanding what the biodiversity of Antarctica looks like. And so rather than protecting the Antarctic environment, it told us that we actually need to protect Antarctic environments, plural. So that's been really critical work to inform ongoing efforts for things like preventing the transfer of species between regions in Antarctica, in addition to what Aleks talked about, aliens in Antarctica, preventing species coming to Antarctica. You can also affect the natural biodiversity by moving species between locations. And it's also really fundamental to the party's ongoing efforts to develop a representative system of Antarctic protected areas, the purpose being to try and ensure the robust and lasting protection of the diversity of Antarctica's values. So now we know there are 16 large-scale areas that have different biodiversity. So if we want a representative system, we need to make sure that is reflected. Thanks.
Thank you, Ewan. And thank you all for those examples, which I think demonstrate that we actually have a proud history of science policy nexus work that achieves real results, and where we communicate and where we collaborate with curiosity and respect, and where we have audacious objectives across the disciplines, we can build mutual understanding and a sense of shared endeavour. So thank you all for participating in the final panel of the day, and I wish you all well. Nicole.